I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing next to what I gain. Come tear down every idol, so this heart won't stray. Don't let me stray. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till.
Shalom, shalom, everybody. Boker Tov, and welcome to the Threshing Floor. My name is Darryl Weinberg, but Light to the Nations Messianic Ministries, and it is my privilege and pleasure to be your host this morning. It is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. Here on the Threshing Floor, we discern between truth and error and discuss all things pertaining to the body of Messiah. And today I have a very exciting guest that is joining me. This is a new friend, but an old friend, and someone who I just recently met. Was on another program with him earlier last week, and we immediately hit it off, knew that we were supposed to be talking much more with each other, and has an amazing, amazing testimony. And so I would like to introduce everybody to Mike van Zanten, better known as Mike the Spike. Hello, Mike.
Hello. How are you doing, Darryl?
I am well, thank you. Pressing on toward the higher calling. How are you this morning?
Yeah, amazing. It's a beautiful day here on the West Coast, here in Aldergrove, British Columbia. And yeah, just blessed to be on this program with you this morning.
So you and I got connected through a prayer. I don't even know exactly what it is that Rick is doing. I got asked by Juju to come on one day, and we've been doing that for the past month now. But you had the opportunity to come on and share a little bit about your journey and what the Lord has been doing with you, and just the whole thing about laying, where you even got your name from. And I guess I'll let you kind of dive into that.
Sure.
And then eventually, I also want you to talk about a little bit. We won't go into too much details about it, but kind of what the Lord had you do over in Israel. And then we're going to jump into what's going on over in Israel right now.
Right. I mean, obviously, unbelievably incredible time of wondering. And with all the events that are happening in the Middle East right now, of course, top of people's minds, and really see that the Lord's hand in the midst of all that as well. But yeah, I can just begin and just share a bit of my testimony, background into where we are today.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in British Columbia in this area, was in a good family business, and really in so many ways was really living the dream in that sense of being financially set, making a very large income at a young age, got married when I was 22. And really, I thought I had the world fully under control. And yet, in the midst of the finances, the big, beautiful new house, the cars, the travel, I was struggling with this deep emptiness inside. And the only thing I could think about was increasing my consumption rate. I just thought if I, would consume more that the world said would make me happy, that should work. And so, I was living the, he who has the most toys at the end wins. But in the midst of that, I was just growing more and more unhappy, and really growing in anger. It feels like I'd been lied to. And so my consumption of alcoholism and much more depravity just sort of increased and through my 20s, which led to, after 7 years of marriage, my wife saying to me, "This marriage is over. Your touch is like razor blades, and when you leave the house, I wish you for dead. So, I mean, our marriage was as finished as I'd ever seen. And I realized in that moment that that my life was a complete disastrous mess. And I said to my wife, look, you know, I got myself into this mess. I'll get myself out. And so for 11 months, I did everything I could to change. And so I would, you know, stop the drinking and stop the other depravities. And then I would crash and burn. And then I would attempt it again. And really, after about 10 months especially, I realized that I could not control my life. I could not stop the depravity of my life. And it was at that point that I started to plan my suicide. I, again, in a family business, so I checked with our insurance company in a creative way, but just made sure that, you know, there would be insurance paid out when I committed suicide, so that my wife could start over with our now 2 very young sons at that point, and started planning that when I went up to Peace River, Alberta, as I did every year, that it would be there that I would take my life, and she could be free of my insanity, and she could begin a new journey at that point. And so it was literally there that as I parked in the hotel parking lot, realizing this was my final moments, I just started to drive around the town of Peace River, and I ended up right in front of this little church right on the Peace River. And I went up to the front door. It was open. I walked in, but there was nobody there. I mean, that's miracle one in one sense, that that there was an open church. And I walked in, and as I stood in the back looking up at the front, there was a big crucifix up at the front. And as I started to walk up, completely empty, completely in despair of where I was, all of a sudden, I had what we called Crazy Uncle Robert, my wife's uncle, who kept sharing about the love of Jesus for many years with me. But I kept referring to him as a weak man. You know, he needed a crutch I didn't need. I was a self-made guy. Anyway, in this moment, all that he had shared for the years began to line up. And as I walked up under that crucifix and I stood there at the front of the church looking up by myself, I audibly, I know it seems weird to say this, but I audibly heard these words: I died that you might live. I died to take the filth of your life upon myself so that you could be set free. And those words hit me so hard. I knew, just everything in me knew that this was the voice of God. And I just collapsed in tears, buckets of tears, literally made a couple puddles there as I just wept uncontrollably for the filth of my life, of who I'd been, and just now connecting with this love that just impacted me. And right immediately, what came to my mind is I just said, you know, Jesus, if you're real, if you're coming in, I said, I'm getting out of the driver's seat of my life. I've made a complete train wreck of my life. I'm moving to the passenger seat. I'm inviting you to come into the driver's seat of my life. I surrender my life to you. Just come in and take control of my life and lead me, and I will follow you wherever I lead. And I just felt a fire hose of the Spirit of God just hit me. And it was like the filth of my life just began to be washed out of me in those moments.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was my life. I had a Damascus Road experience at that point, and my life began to change. What happened, it was a priest ended up walking in, again, a couple hours into this. I just sat with him on the pew, confessed my life, and he just said, look, you have met Jesus. He has healed you. He has forgiven you, and you can now go and begin your new life. And that was a great conversation. I walked out, and it was like the world had begun to change. I ended up going and checking into the hotel. I phoned my wife. I told her what had happened to me. And of course, you know, I'd been making promises for 11 months with ongoing failures. But what she will say, and has often said, that my voice was different. She said, we met when I was 16 and she was 15. She said, all of a sudden, all the anger and hatred in your voice was no longer there. She said, you sounded like you did when we first met when you were 16. And she said she knew something dramatic had happened. And of course, I was still away on a business trip at that point. But 2 days later, she ended up surrendering her life to Jesus through unbelievable, miraculous circumstances. And I flew home a few days after that, and we began a new marriage, a new relationship. And miraculously, the Lord healed that relationship through obviously some years of me taking responsibility for the things that I've done slowly over time, and then confessing everything I had done. And the Lord gave her the grace and the mercy to forgive me for what I had done. And we really did begin a new life. And now coming up to 39 years of marriage, 4 children, 4 grandchildren, 4 grandsons now. And incredible to see how the Lord healed me, healed us in this relationship and this family in that moment.
Wow. That is that is indeed a Damascus Road experience. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I'd asked him, when did you come to faith? And he really couldn't give me a definitive answer. It's, he'd just been kind of floating along all this time. And, he did kind of pinpoint when he started to get serious about things. But my testimony is very much like you. As a matter of fact, I think I said kind of the same thing the night that I got saved. Is just like, I literally had the car keys and I just said, here, you drive. I can't do this anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
And I can give you the date, the time, exactly where I was, what was going on, everything. So it's, and I think it's much more impactful and meaningful when that is what happens, because it's very much like the Apostle Paul, as you said. The transformation is so much more meaningful, I guess, and noticeable. I mean, you can really kind of define and it's usually the people who have a really intense calling that happens with. They get dragged out of dark places and into the light. So that's amazing. So what kind of church did you start off? You and your wife, you both received the Lord now. Talk a little bit about your journey and how you got into the Messianic lifestyle.
Right. Well, that's a bit of a story. And I just wanted to touch on what you just said, going from death to life. That's how I see it. Obviously the Apostle Paul is referring to that. I think of Romans, 5, 6, 7, leading into Romans 8, of that death, of dying and coming into that new life, that resurrected man from the dead. And so that journey, as you described yours and mine, October 6th of 1994, again, knowing that exact time of when I was dead and risen new in Christ. It's important for people to have some sense of that happening, even if you were brought up in the faith, because it really, I think that is the importance of igniting a new life filled with the Holy Spirit to begin. So yes, that journey began. My wife and I both born and raised in the Catholic Church. So we just thought, okay, let's start going to church in the Catholic Church. And, 3-4 weeks in, we looked at each other and just thought, okay, we're not receiving or experiencing what had happened in our lives. And and again, I know that there have been some incredible, even Catholic churches that have been filled with the Spirit. We certainly couldn't find any, so we moved around for a bit. And all of a sudden, one day, it just seemed almost impossible. We just thought, let's go somewhere else. And so we really went on a journey of going to a church week after week after week, and finally ended up in a place called Southside Community Church in Burnaby. It was the pastor there, Cam Roxborough, and really an amazing place that we landed there. And what happened, we got involved. They had small groups my wife and I joined a small group that was in Surrey, where we were, joined that small group. At that time, I was consuming so much information. Back then, we're talking about looking at or listening to cassettes. We're talking about 30 years ago, but just consuming everything I can, reading the Bible, reading everything I could, and was just so excited about my faith. So within about 6 months, I became an apprentice in that small group. That group then grew. People around me were coming to faith regularly, and so it was growing. So then I became a small group leader at that point. And then as our group started to multiply in Surrey, we realized we needed to launch a congregation. And so July of 1997, 2.5 years later, I was now a pastor and launching a congregation as part of Southside under our lead pastor to start this new work in Surrey. And I launched this congregation as a congregational leader with the help of the church. And it really was amazing. And then we began, and more people around us coming to faith. And so we outgrew that. So we multiplied some people off and started another congregation and grew again. And it was a wild, amazing time of seeing lives transformed. At the same time, we had, at this point, 4 young children going 100 miles an hour with new converts. I mean, we really had very little church transfer growth. We almost didn't want that. We would really wanted conversion type growth, but at the same time, people are coming out of addictions. People are coming out of different struggles. And so it was a wild journey, but sadly, I didn't have any real clear boundaries. And so we had an open door policy, but I ended up crashing and burning 10 years in. Came out of being a pastor back into the business world and continued the journey of really assessing what it means to be a person walking in faith and in the church in that sense, but began to really ask and seek the Lord on what does it mean to be the people of God, and began to understand the difference between the churches that was existing that I was aware of in North America and what Yeshua, and I began to understand Jesus, his name Yeshua, began to really dive into the Hebraic roots, looking at the word that Yeshua used for ecclesia, that we translated to church, and understanding, I think, our misperception of really what that was. And so began to dive in to the Greek and the Hebrew of that, and began to ask, what did Jesus mean when he used the word ecclesia 2,000 years ago? What did that word mean? And what does that mean now to be the people of God? And really in the midst of that, connecting with our Hebraic roots, understanding the feasts and the festivals of Leviticus 23 and all of that. And so my life took another huge change in the midst of really diving into a bigger way what it means to be the ecclesia and to know our Hebraic and roots that way.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, it's funny because when you look at the King James, the word church was put in there by King James, but church actually comes from, and I cover this actually in my book, comes from the Greek goddess Circe, where we get circus from. And the ecclesia is really just the original meaning of the word is the called out ones.
Right.
But in the Koine Greek, it just simply means a group of people. The Dimitri and the silversmiths in Acts chapter 16, they were an ecclesia. They're just a group of people gathering together with common interests. But we can define it really as the body. Quite often in the Greek, it's Paul uses the word synagogia, for the gathering of the people, but it's really the body of Messiah. And unfortunately, I think that because of the pagan word that we use, and also because of the idea behind it, we've kind of narrowly defined what the church is, and that it's a building that we go to. And that was never the intent, I think, of the Lord, where it's we are the ecclesia, we are the body, and we function in that 24/7.
Yes. Yeah. And really, if as Jesus used the word ecclesia, Yeshua uses that word, he uses it in a time when especially the governance in the Greek towns, even cities, they had what they called the ecclesia. That was the gathering of those, the assembled, that would then govern both the people and the land. And
Right.
so there was this governance side to this, which to me really ties back to Genesis 1:26-28. We were created in the image and likeness of Yahweh, created in the fullness and the likeness and image and likeness to have dominion, to rule and reign upon the earth. And so when Jesus uses the word ecclesia, for me, it really ties to that understanding of governance and of the assembled of the people who then begin to understand what it means to rule and reign upon the earth in that way.
Amen. So you've got these congregations you've planted, you've started to go to a Messianic way, you're starting to celebrate the feast days and everything else.
Yes.
So talk about the transition to, what you are now doing, and how did you get this whole spike ministry? I mean, I don't even know what else to call it.
Sure. Well, so I had then, I talked about moving. I ended up leaving the congregations at that point. Joined another church gathering, and then eventually came out of that and started my own home ecclesia gathering. And really understanding, we call it a kingdom ecclesia, as Yeshua came to usher in the kingdom, right? To bring, people look at what is the good news. The good news is that the kingdom of God has come again, and the establishment of that, and the keys of the kingdom, as Yeshua reclaims those keys and is given those to his ecclesia to begin to understand. And so we formed this group of people in our house with the whole understanding of beginning to impact the earth, beginning to understand the importance of reclaiming the earth for the kingdom and the people in that way. And so that really launched me as I was seeking that. Back January 21st of 2022 is when all of a sudden the Lord, again, I heard from the Lord that he said, this weekend is beginning a movement from Western Canada. It's going to begin to impact all of Canada and the rest of the world. There's a lot more to that, but I won't get into all that. But it was that weekend that the truckers convoy left Vancouver and headed towards Ottawa. So that gives very clear understanding. Most people will know around when that happened, but that they left January 23rd of 2022. That same day. So I was there on an overpass and just sensed the Lord was in the midst of that. Again, I'm not trying to call that a revival gathering, but there was something about the pursuit of freedom in the midst of the tyranny of that, what was happening upon the earth in those days. And so later that day, the Lord said to me, or that morning, the Lord said, I now need you to go to this other gathering. I wasn't even sure where it was. Supernaturally, the Lord brings me to this other gathering. But it was there that Barry Wunsch was the speaker there. I didn't really know who Barry Wunsch was at that time. But he started to talk about Dutch Sheets and Tim Sheets and others who had a bunch of spikes. So they drove 50 spikes into every capital of every state of the United States of America. And then he said that Dutch had brought 12 or 13 of those spikes into Canada. They had this, where there was this gathering, and he called anybody forward who wanted a spike to come forward and grab one. Barry Wunsch went up, and he took one of those spikes. And when he went home, he said, asked the Lord, is there anything I should do with this? And the Lord said, not yet. So he just put it on his shelf. And he said about 4 years later, which was just a week before I saw him there, the Lord had said to him, it's time for the spike to go in the earth on the very west coast of Canada. And so he came, he was speaking. So he held up a golden spike. And it was just like the Spirit of the Lord hit me very powerfully in the midst of that. And I just thought, okay, what is this? And I realized there was something about that spike going in the earth that I needed to be aware of participating in. Except that I didn't really know anybody at that gathering. So I left there. They ended up going to Derby Reach in Fort Langley, BC, where the first fort, I didn't know this at the time, but where the very first fort of Western Canada was established. It was no longer there. What currently exists is a fourth fort, but that where the location of the first fort it was, they drove that spike in the earth. And it's really about the spikes going in, as I understood it through Dutch and what was leading in, is to really declare that land for Yeshua. They would have certainly said Jesus, but to declare the land by that spike, representing the spikes that went into the hands and feet of Yeshua, driving that spike in and declaring that land for the kingdom to again be established in greater ways. So the next morning I hear about it. I only hear that spike went into Fort Langley. And again, I sense the Lord say to me, go to the spike. And so I just started driving to Fort Langley. I made one phone call, and the person told me, well, it was in Derby Reach, which is a massive park. It's like, 15 kilometers wide. I mean, it's just a large area. And and he also said that the spike, he didn't know it was dark. He said he doesn't have a better descriptor. He said, he said, you'll never find it. We put it 4 inches underground. We removed the grass in such a way, drove the spike in, put the grass back so nobody could ever find it. So I just went there, second location. I got out of my car. I just started to walk. And all of a sudden the Lord's guiding me. And he says, there it is. I don't see anything. So I get on my hands and knees. He says, there it is. Again, I don't see anything. So I just start to dig with my hands, and I touch the head of the spike. And it was there that, again, I just sensed the power of Yeshua on me, the power of God. And all of a sudden I hear these words, build an altar of 12 stones here and now. And I'm like, okay, right? Build an altar of 12 stones. I had been doing some study through the book of Joshua and through Genesis, about altars. I thought that was interesting because the Lord was speaking to me about land and altars and significance of altars being built, 12 stone altars being built on land. And so when he said that to me, I just said, okay. So I started to look around me for some rocks. And he said, no, only the rocks in the river, because I'm up on a bank right by the Fraser River. So I'm now in the river grabbing stones, and I built an altar of 12 stones there. And that began. So of course, the truckers arrive in Ottawa about 6 days later. We have another gathering because we knew God was up to something with that spike, with that altar. So a bunch of people gathered there the following Saturday, just as they were arriving in Ottawa. And a number of days later, that next day, 3 a.m, the Lord wakes me up and says, I need you to drive a spike behind the Parliament buildings right away. And of course, during that time, I couldn't fly, because of the jab restrictions and everything. And I just knew he meant, I need you to drive to Ottawa to put a spike behind the Parliament buildings and build an altar of 12 stones.
So how long a drive was that?
So it's a 4,300 kilometer drive in the midst of winter, right? So we're only talking then the first week of February.
And it was cold that year. I mean,
Very cold. The
I
whole
remember
time in Ottawa was in the minus 30s day after.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember they had hot tubs out there and everything that was going on, but it was really cold at that time.
Oh yeah, and all across Canada. I mean, one just quick funny story. My daughter, I said to my daughter, "Look, we're driving to Ottawa. Can you come?" And my youngest daughter, and she's a fairly a very good driver actually, knowing that we were driving through snow and ice. And at one point, I had dozed off because we drove through the night. We did that 4,300 kilometer drive in less than 44 hours. So wow. we only stopped for gas, and we exceeded the speed limit at times. So anyway, as we're going, and I'm sleeping, I hear my daughter go, "Oh!" And so I open my eyes, and we're now going almost diagonally down the highway. I look at the speedometer, which says 120 kilometers, and I don't say a word. I just slowly watch my daughter. She gets the car, starts straight again. I said, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Dad, I'm great." She hits the accelerator. I fall back to sleep. But it was just this sense of God's hand upon us, honestly. Yeah. So as we were driving there, because I said to the Lord when he said, "I need you to drive a spike," I said, "Lord, I don't have a spike." So he shows me, I get an image of my mind of a grain elevator, a barn, and a railroad track. And I thought, okay, over 4,300 kilometers, I'm going to see this somewhere. So just outside of Calgary, my daughter and I get some gas. We come out of the gas station, turn right, and I say to her, "There it is. There's the barn. There's a grain elevator that the Lord showed me. There's a train track." I pull over right by the train track. I get out of my car, and hand placed right there on the edge of the gravel going to the train tracks is a spike sitting there. So I'm like, okay, this is on, right? Grab that spike. I also had grabbed 12 stones out of my stream behind my house, a backpack about 70 pounds. We get to Ottawa. You can't walk behind the Parliament buildings. They had all that closed those few days. The start of the trip. So I go on the Quebec side behind the Parliament buildings. Again, you're right. It's in about minus 32 that day. Carry this backpack of stones. And now I'm going to put this spike in the ground. I have people wanted to watch this in Zoom. So I've got a couple hundred people now watching on Zoom of me speaking about arriving there, being there behind the Parliament buildings, driving the spike in the ground. And I grab one of the stones as I'm talking, and my daughter says to me, "Dad, the stones are turning gold." I'm like, "What?" So I look, and all of a sudden you could see gold appearing on the stone.
Wow.
So, and I hold it up to the camera. You can actually see this happening on video footage. So I put that stone down. I grab another stone, and I said, "Look again. Gold is appearing on the stone." Of course, the Zoom meeting went a bit ballistic as people were just amazed. And again, just a sense of the presence of God, something incredibly supernatural is happening. Again, I drive that spike in the ground, build the altar at 12 stones, and then go into Ottawa. We then begin the Jericho March. They now opened the walkway behind Parliament buildings, 7 days of that. And that was, I hope everybody understands that was the most incredibly loving event. There was nothing violent about that event. The truckers convoy gatherings were some of the most incredibly caring, loving. One of the greatest events I've ever been to in my life was the time there. Anyway, I ended up going back just before the next day. I didn't know they were going to end up shutting everything down the way that they did and all that, the Emergency Act. Anyway, on the way home, as I'm driving, the Lord says, "I need you to drive a spike now at the border of Canada and the United States." I said, "Okay, where do I find the spike?" He says to me, "On the other side of the train tracks you were." So I immediately say to my daughter, "Do you know where those train tracks were?" She said, "Dad, I don't have any idea," because we were off this large detour outside of Calgary. Anyway, Lord brings us there. She gets out of the car this time, another hand-placed spike right there. And so on February 22nd, 2022 at 2:22 p.m., I'm standing there with 1 foot in the United States, 1 foot in Canada with the water behind me at the Peace Arch border crossing. We drive that spike into the earth. We build an altar of 12 stones. And then that just led to more and more spikes in the Lower Mainland. Then he called me all across Canada, to every province, to every territory. There's a lot of stories there as well. And just had me driving spikes in the earth. And really, it was right at the beginning that somebody called me Mike the Spike. And that name stuck as the Lord had me driving spikes across Canada at that point.
Wow. So you've been through all 10 provinces and 3 territories. So
Yes.
you've gone up to, what was it, Yellowknife, Whitehorse, and
Callaway.
And New Callaway, up in Nunavut there. Thank God he didn't send you up to Alert. I mean, that would have been.
Yes, I did do some work on it, right? Wondering, but Callaway really is the most populated place that north. And that was one of the keys. It wasn't, because he did ask me to go to the farthest west, farthest east, farthest south of Canada. And then he said, in the farthest north, the most populated, and that just so happened to be the capital of Nunavut, which accomplished both of those things.
Right. So you do all this. You've driven like 43,000 kilometers or some.
Yes, in multiple trips. Yes.
Yeah. But you weren't done with just Canada.
Right. Yes. You see, I do a work. I lead a ministry in Zimbabwe and Zambia. And so we take care of about 400 children, a couple hundred in each location. We've just built elementary schools. And so I was traveling there twice a year. And yes, I was driving spikes in the earth there. But as I came back, as I just started to do the spiking of the earth after I could start to travel. So there was about 2.5 years. I couldn't fly there because of all the crazy, let's call them, restrictions at the time of not being able to fly. So as I returned from there, the Lord, I just again sense the Lord say to me, if you're going to impact the nations, you must go through Israel. And so I had never been to Israel at that point. You know, I'd wondered at some point I would go to Israel, but wasn't a real huge desire in my heart at that point.
Right.
And so when he said, you must go through Israel, then he said to me, I'm calling you to drive 12 spikes into 12 specific locations and build 12 altars of 12 stones. So that was the word. And that was the assignment. And so all of a sudden, I say to my wife, we're going to Israel. Within 6 weeks, we were now flying to Israel. I carry some stuff with me, all the spikes. I have a gavel that I carry. You know, here it is. You can see spikes in each end and on the bottom. And so I carry this. This is a gavel that often as I drive the spike in, the Lord said, this is how I make declarations as I strike the earth. And so these aren't things that you can generally just travel around with, especially going into Israel. So I was told by people that were there, you cannot do what you're saying. You cannot just go to these locations and put spikes in the earth. Like there's video cameras everywhere. There's, guards and security everywhere. Yeah. And they said, you won't even get into the country. So I just said, if I've heard properly from the Lord, he will get me in, right? That was just and if I didn't hear from the Lord, obviously, they would take away all this stuff and it wouldn't happen. So as we fly into Israel, I've got my wife and 2 other people joining us. We're coming down this huge ramp. As you come into Israel, anybody who's flown there, you'll know their airport. You come down that huge ramp into customs. So we come into this massive customs area. I'm not sure I've ever been to a larger one. It seems like, 100 desks there and hundreds of people are there. Anyway, As we're walking in, sorry, did you want to say something about that?
No, okay. Keep going.
As we're in this huge area and many people all around, all of a sudden I hear this voice on one of these outside ropes that are, herding people in, and about 5 people away from me. She goes, sir. And I look, and she calls me over, and she says, excuse me, sir, I'm giving you a pass to go past all of customs. I said, okay, well, I have 3 others with me. So I'm kind of realizing something supernatural is happening. So she says, yes. So I called the 3 other people. So she gives us mine plus the other 3 little cards. They look like lime green little cards. And she goes, just walk by all the customs, walk by everybody, and you can just walk out of the airport. I'm thinking, okay. My wife is like, this doesn't make sense. She was quite concerned. But as we just walked by all the customs, by all the security, all we did is I'd show them my card. As soon as I showed them my card, it was almost like fear struck them, and they would just wave us past them. They wouldn't even talk to us. I'd show the card, and then they'd wave us past, and we literally walked out of the Israeli airport without seeing one person, speaking to one person. And I realized as we walked out, everything will be accomplished because the Lord has his hand upon it.
So it turns out, what were those cards?
Well, as I came back after the trip, I'm down. I used to spend a lot of time down at my stream. I now have a river behind me. But as I was down at the stream, at that point, I just said, Lord, how was that possible? He said, that was an ambassador's card. So when you held it, what they saw was ambassador. And so it was an ambassador's card that you could bypass all security. All I saw was a lime green. So miraculously, it was an angel. And he said, it was an angel who gave you those cards, who just told you to go. And that when I showed them, they would see us as ambassadors and just waved us through.
Wow.
Okay. And at that point, all of a sudden, we're coming in. And so I had some very specific locations that we had to drive the spike, one on Mount Zion, another as this new location where they believe Pilate judged Yeshua, up on 2 of them were up on the Mount of Olives in very specific locations. And then the one that was going to be a big challenge, I did at Mount Carmel, some very high places, again, all around the nation, and even in Lebanon. Anyway, as we were there, one location was going to be right at Gate Beautiful, the Eastern Gate, right? So as you're up on Mount of Olives and you're looking at the wall, looking at Temple Mount, there's a massive gate right there, the Eastern Gate. And it was there, and the Lord said to me, I need you to put a spike right there at this gate, right in the corner of this gate. And I thought, okay, this will be an interesting one because the amount of security around Temple Mount and the wall, and plus you have to actually walk into and across a Muslim graveyard area. And so I did this assignment on my own. Late one day. And so I'm up there. I've got a backpack where I have, the spike. I've got oil. I've got wine and representing the blood of Yeshua. I've got bread. I've got water. I've got multiple things. And so here I am. I get up to the Gate Beautiful. I'm pulling stuff out of my backpack. Of course, I take stuff out of my backpack. I'm now putting stuff in the earth, and I realize I'm on cameras, right? And so it's going to look pretty suspicious that a person on their knees pulling stuff out of their backpack and placing it in the ground right there on the wall of Temple Mount and Gate Beautiful. And so anyway, I do it. I build an altar of 12 stones. I pour the blood of Yeshua, the body of Yeshua, and oil. And I'm doing all that, and I'm about to do a video because every time I would do a video of those locations, and I just sense this whisper of the Lord saying, "Get out of here, remove yourself." So I, grab my stuff, I scurry down to the path, and I thought, all of a sudden, as I look, I hear running footsteps, and I look because it's getting dark now. There are 4 soldiers, security, running at me with their machine guns pointed. And now I just thought, okay, I'm going to turn and start to walk. Well, they start screaming at me. So I just turn, hold my hands up, and the 4 of them run up to me because, of course, I see that they're on radios, and they've been told that I've planted something against the wall. And I could see in their eyes, at least 3 of them wanted to shoot me. One of them, thankfully, realized that, they wanted to see what had happened. And so I ended up giving them my ID. I had to bring them up to the wall. They were very upset that I was there. I had to tell them, I just said, look, I went there to pray. This is where Yeshua walked through this gate many, many times. I just wanted to pray there. There's no sign saying not to go in. And they were, again, very agitated. So I go up there. Now it's getting quite dark. And so they got high-powered flashlights, and they're looking at everything there at the wall and what had happened. And then all of a sudden, the one police officer, guard, holds his flashlight on the 12-stone altar that is soaking wet and glistening. I mean, just the light was glistening. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, right? So, but all of a sudden, 5 seconds of holding it, he moves his flashlight, gives me my ID, and says, okay, do not come back here. And they did not see it. It was like the Lord blinded them from seeing what was very clearly glistening with his flashlight, and set me on my way. But anyway, that was one of the 12 spikes and altars that were built all over Israel, and again, even into Lebanon.
Wow. And you also went up to Mount Hermon.
Yes. So that was my 4th trip. So what I've been describing is my first trip. And then each time the Lord has given me very specific assignments. So since this was now January, the first trip was February, actually, of 2023. So since then, I've been there 3 more times. So 4 times in total now, with very specific assignments. So this 4th trip, the Lord had spoken to me.
And we could spend a whole hour just talking about this alone, but I want you to kind of just lay it out, because before we've got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
I also want to, quickly address, what's going on in Israel right now and how this connects to what you've done.
Yeah. So let me just say this very quickly. So I hear the Lord says to me, I need you to go to Israel and get to the top of Mount Hermon to deal with the Nephilim agenda and the Nephilim. And again, we can talk a lot about that maybe we'll do this on another broadcast.
Yeah.
And all of that. Anyway, all of that was closed down, but there was a small window of opportunity. I end up flying there with some others. We have a whole prayer strategy. We end up on the top of Mount Hermon with Rick and Patty Ridings from Israel and others, 22-page prayer assignment of dealing with the Nephilim agenda on Mount Hermon as you stand there looking over Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and again, just putting a spike into the top of Mount Hermon in the midst of communion elements, and all of us, there's about 25 of us taking communion and declaring the kingdom of God and the establishment of the kingdom over Mount Hermon, over Israel, over this region in that time. And that was one of the most, and maybe up to this point, the most powerful experience I've ever had in my life there, as we dealt with the demonic agenda of that it was established on Mount Hermon. And I believe that so much is what has happened since October of 2025. So I'm only talking about 4 months ago. Of what has happened since October, I think it was about the 22nd or so of October of 2025, when we did that on Mount Hermon, and what has happened upon the earth and even in the Middle East since that time. Within hours of us doing that assignment on Mount Hermon, at the very top, within several hours, they were moving a bunch of weaponry, bombs, and guns and stuff from Lebanon into Syria. And the IDF became aware, captured all the people and all of the war material that they were bringing across. All of that was captured within hours of us on Mount Hermon. And it was like the Lord was saying, this is beginning to bring a shift in what was happening in that whole region. And again, what we've continued to see upon the earth.
So has the Lord given you any indication, and there's so many questions that I have though, did your hammering the spikes in around Israel, what connection did that have, do you know, with October 7th?
So yes, that was just prior to that. And so in the midst of all of those things, I've never, on any assignment, I just do what I'm told. And, just what the results of those are, I don't always know, And so Can I specifically say, how did that impact? I know that those 12 spikes had an impact on the declaration of Yeshua upon that land, that place, the declared land of Israel, and how that is being played out in these days. And then Mount Hermon in the midst of all that. I don't like to be too specific because I don't like to take credit. I'm just doing what the Lord's asked me to do. But I do believe there are results that are happening. Yeah.
And so when you were up at the top of Mount Hermon, did you actually do anything down at Pan's Grotto there?
Yes, I have been there, Caesarea Philippi, and of course, all that had taken place. That was part of my first trip, was Caesarea Philippi, and of course, the gate of Hades. So as Yeshua is declaring, first, of course, he brings his disciples there, as we see in Matthew 16. He is there, the declaration of who he was in the enemy's camp. It's declared that he is the Christ, the Messiah. And then it was there that he declares the ecclesia, and at the gates of Hades, as he's looking at the gate of Hades, where many sacrifices were made, said that gate could not overcome the ecclesia. But yes, I've also done work there because that's right at the base of Mount Hermon. You're right.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So you've been going all over the world, it would seem. Any other countries that you've been doing these, but you said Zambia and Namibia, which is where Victoria Falls is.
Yeah, so Victoria Falls sort of centers Zimbabwe and Zambia. We're in a place called Musana and Twishuka in those nations. And also the Lord began to have me do some spikes in the United States of America. And so I have been doing some of those, that one that was at the border, but also in Hawaii where those fires were. And of course, I think nefarious things that happened around those fires. He actually brought me through the gate right onto the land and declaring his kingdom in the midst of what happened there in Hawaii and Maui. On the Maui Island, and then continuing into Muckleshoot, where there was a gathering of First Nations from all over the world in preparation for the opening of the embassy, the First Nations embassy in Jerusalem. So that was prior to that opening, which has been about 1.5 years now. And so, lots of that happening as well.
Wow. Okay. So, do you have any sense of what's next then? Do you have any upcoming assignments?
Well, yes, I do have an incredible assignment coming up. This is, I can't give too many specifics of exact dates because we need to go undercover when we do these things. But he has called us to go to Washington, D.C., the city of London, and to Rome, the Vatican, because of all the financial stuff. And, I don't know how awake people are to the reality of what has happened upon the earth, but these are 3 very key strategic locations. But even before going to Washington, D.C., he's called me and a group with me to go to Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island's just off the coast of Georgia. That's where several men gathered who controlled about a third of the wealth of the world at that point in 1910. They gathered there from November 20th to November 30th to bring together and develop the Federal Reserve. So Jekyll Island, which we also, if you do any study on it, you'll also be aware that they have some very large skeletons, meaning that there were people there who were somewhere between 7.5 to 9 feet tall on Jekyll Island. And again, if you know much of the Nephilim upon the earth, these giants, as you see who Goliath was, anyway, tied to all that lineage on Jekyll Island, where they did many baby sacrifices of infants and the whole history of the Nephilim. That's where the Federal Reserve was set up. So we're going there to deal with the root system of the Federal Reserve, and then to Washington, D.C. from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, sadly, we've come to the end of our hour. We could just keep going here because you were only giving little snippets of
yes.
But Mike, thanks so much for joining us. This has been exhilarating, and just to see what the Lord is doing here is amazing. We will certainly be in prayer for your ministry.
Thank you.
And we'll have to do this again.
Yes. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, yeah, there's a lot more to some of these stories. And of course, we didn't even mention, but, we're now coming into Purim. Many around the world are starting a 3-day Esther's fast into Purim with the current events in Israel and the Middle East. Yep. It's amazing. God is putting.
I have decided to join that as well. Excellent. All right. Well, we got to wrap it up here. So we want to wish everybody Shavua Tov, a good week. Thank you for joining us here on lamnetwork.tv. And we will look forward to seeing you right here next week on the threshing floor. Mike, stick around for a couple minutes.
Thank you.
Shalom, everybody.
Shalom. Shalom.
I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lamnetwork.tv, where you can find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take a tour of the lamnetwork.tv website. I'm Darryl Weinberg, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
How can I ever complain? Forgive me, Lord. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor. Let it fall on the threshing floor. Everything that's between